Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Let's Build AI for Finance Teams webinar. Delighted to have you all here, and I believe there's quite a few of you. It'll be myself and Leah who will be walking you through these very practical uses of AI for finance teams that can be deployed today. We'll focus on one particular use case in detail, but also outline quite a few others that you'll likely find of interest. I myself am John McCambridge, the Global Director of Financial Services and Finance Teams Solutions. Leah?
And I'm Leah. I'm a senior data scientist in the solution team at Dataiku.
Thank you. So just to set the table very briefly about Dataiku itself, although as you'll see, what we're going to be talking about is things you can achieve with Dataiku or potentially maybe to somewhat less effect outside of Dataiku. Dataiku itself is a universal analytics, modeling, and agentic platform, universal AI system. As you can see, there's a few critical components to it. One of the most important, though, is the collaborative aspect. We will connect to any data sources, any compute systems, any models that you have, and those could be rules-based models or machine learning models, any large language models that you need to leverage. And within Dataiku itself, you can have any arrangement of players working on a project. You could have a bunch of finance analysts all together working, a single analyst working solo, or a mix of analysts, business leads, and maybe a data scientist to support them, or even an ETL engineer backed up by an FP&A analyst, backed up by an accountant, all inside the same project. And that's achieved in a variety of ways, one of the most important ones being that anyone can use the tooling that makes the most sense for them in their context. So if you need to do full code, that's a possibility, right alongside somebody who's doing no code at all, just visual clicking on recipes. And of course, all of this is done in a highly secure, well-governed platform. This runs inside of your own organization. So you get all of the benefits that you should expect from a no-code platform, for example, alongside all the power that you'd expect from a full code platform, all inside of a collaborative space. Now, when it comes to AI for finance teams specifically, though, we want to talk in real concrete terms here about what you can actually achieve today with the technology as it exists now. What you're going to see here are not concepts that you might do down the line if things improve, for example. This is the kind of work that can be achieved right now with a rather straightforward arrangement, somewhere where you store and compute your data, Dataiku to allow you to build and orchestrate all your processes, and then a connection to a large language model to run your generative AI components. That's really all you need. Now, that's easier said than done, but that is an achievable goal inside of firms today. And with Dataiku, it's easier to achieve that in a robust way. In terms of this kind of transformational impact, it's very grand. You can have massive improvements in efficiency and speed, agility, and so on. But rather than kind of talk about these in abstract or even in concrete kind of terms for specific clients, I'd like to talk about what the principles would look like for you in your own situation. The most important thing that I'll emphasize throughout this entire process is that you do not have to wait to use Gen AI. Generative AI capabilities are available to you today if you have a platform that supports them, which of course Dataiku does. You don't need, for example, to have a bunch of machine learning models in place and then graduate to using Gen AI. In fact, it is extremely common, even today, for firms and specifically finance teams to be leveraging generative AI to process data, to manage reporting, to handle problems, and to have no machine learning. Right? They are using Gen AI, large language models, but they don't have any machine learning in place. They may in the future decide to leverage that for their own needs, like for forecasting, but they don't have to have both, and you don't have to do it in some kind of order. In fact, the most common order for people today is that they do some very basic initial work on their analytics using Dataiku to arrange some data pipelines. Again, not getting things to 100% perfection, just enough data in the right place that you can do something sensible with it. And then they immediately start unifying that data and leveraging Gen AI on it. And they can add in machine learning later. So that's the most important strategic takeaway I want to give you today. You don't have to wait. You can use Gen AI sensibly and effectively today. And you're going to see very concrete ways in which that can happen. Now, if we were to think about where we see our finance teams succeeding with Dataiku, there's wide array of places in which they succeed, but P&L optimization is one of the most common. So they'll bring in all of their different systems and components. That's different data pipes, reconciliation challenges, maybe some process mining. Again, they'll be bringing in the intelligence behind their processes. These will be rules-based things, formulas, statistical analyses they're already performing, and if they want, some machine learning. And then they'll be scaling this out using things like document intelligence to process unstructured documents like a PDF, using GenAI to power insights effectively and then reviewing them with a person, and using agents to automate this process. Again, we're going to show you some very concrete ways in which all of that actually manifests today. You'll see one of these in particular has been highlighted, reconciliation, because the heart of the demonstration today is going to be based around that most common of challenges, effective reconciliation of data. However, you're going to see a classic reconciliation use case, the kind of thing you would have seen years ago with, a data process, matching algorithms, a nice review dashboard, manual checks. And then you're going to see how that can be massively enhanced using generative AI today. Of course, this wouldn't be the whole of the kinds of things that you can do within Dataiku across your teams. Dataiku is an incredibly broad platform. It's incredibly powerful for finance teams, but also many other teams within your organization. Here alone, just within finance and its kind of associated teams and groups, you can see a huge sweep of projects. Remember that Dataiku is not a point solution. It's the place that you build and succeed in your various workflows. And one of the most important parts of that is integration. Dataiku is collaborative, like I said before, collaborative with your systems, collaborative across your people, but it's also collaborative across your use cases. Some of the most powerful work you can do is only possible by combining other distinct projects, unifying them as a foundation to build on top of. And that's one of the most natural things in the world to do with Dataiku. Now, before we get to the reconciliation use case, which is going to be the heart of the conversation here and demonstrated to you in detail, let me just quickly talk to you about two other obvious use cases you may want to have. Again, just to give you a sense of the sweep. Another really classic one, if, for example, you're very keen to go down this machine learning today path, or something you may have experimented with before and want to revisit, would be financial forecasting. This could be for cash flows, like daily cash flows, or it could be weekly or monthly revenues or costs, for example. Again, within Dataiku, it's very straightforward to leverage our platform and indeed the pre-built solutions that we can offer you, one of which you'll see later for reconciliation as well, to build out an incredibly powerful but very straightforward and easily interpreted model for predicting your financial forecasts. In particular, these models leverage a variety of different techniques, including very classic statistical techniques, things like autoregression, the kind of analysis you might have done for many years. And then alongside them allows you to build an experiment with simple machine learning models, and critically allows you to evaluate them alongside one another and any historical processes you've used. So you can actually say to yourself, well, I could use a simple statistical model at the click of a button. Oh, look, that's pretty predictive. I could put a lot more effort into building a complex machine learning model with drivers and all sorts of interesting factors. But then what I want to do is compare the two and say, look, is it worth the extra effort? Is it worth having to explain the complexities of that machine learning model? And if it is, how can I explain them cleanly, effectively, and simply? All of those problems can be solved by building out this structure inside of Dataiku. So for those of you interested, we could always discuss in the future our machine learning and classical statistics financial forecasting solution. Another completely distinct approach you might want to take is a different agentic solution to something like receivables management. Here, we have a simple sketch of an agentic framework in which an agent is directly supporting a human agent handling receivables. And in this case, you're going to be leveraging a variety of different systems that will be interconnected, a variety of existing models around, say, risk scoring or management of rules around who to contact and when, the interpretation perhaps of unstructured documents like invoices or vendor contracts, master services agreements, which might contain critical clauses, and unifying all of that into a chatbot interface with a robust dashboard on top of that for managing your individual outstanding contracts, and the ability, most critically, for a human to leverage all of that to speed up their own work. You're not handing everything over to an AI agent and hoping for the best, hoping that it does what it's supposed to do and doesn't mess up or doesn't confuse matters. You have a human agent who is sitting alongside of that AI agent and is the final arbiter of what's going to be done. It's all about accelerating, speeding up, making more efficient, taking away a lot of the grunt work or the manual plotting that human agent had to do and allowing them to focus on the critical decisions that are actually the heart of their role. So those are two other examples, along with the many others that you would have seen in the orbit before. But now let's turn to what you're going to be seeing in depth today. This is GenAI enhanced reconciliation. We take one of the most classic challenges for any finance team, reconciliation processes, and we want to show you both how you can achieve that today in Dataiku in the classic sense, in which you have everything that you need: data inputs, matching, including fuzzy matching capabilities, rules, an audit log for everything that's been done, including how it was set up and what matches were handled, dashboards to monitor the results, and then a manual interface to resolve those pesky unmatched results that need to be intervened with by a human. That's the classic way to do reconciliation, and we'll show you exactly how to do it beautifully inside of Dataiku. But vitally, you're going to see two additional components that wouldn't have been possible a few years ago, but are possible today. Those components are using a large language model to load in some of the critical data in the first place, to clean it and process it in intelligent ways, using either deterministic formulas like you would have in the past, or using the large language model itself to handle the data. You'll see how easy it would be to set that up and how doing that kind of cleaning beforehand can dramatically improve the reconciliation process itself. And then vitally, you're going to see at the other end of the process in reconciliation, when you've gathered all of those manual reconciliations, all those records that you had to go in and check by hand because they slipped through the existing rules. And you've likely sat and thought to yourself, I really wish that I could just know at the click of a button what are the implied rules that are actually being enacted here when my team manually resolves these. What I should be doing is figuring out, is there a way that I could improve the rules at the start of this process, the matching rules at the start, so that I'm not constantly having to handle these edge cases down at the end? Yeah, maybe there's always going to be a few edge cases, but surely it doesn't have to be this many. Surely the percentage of edge cases should be falling as I continue to do these manual work. But in reality, that often doesn't happen. It's often confusing to handle. Maybe you don't have the right data to hand because you're not generating audit logs effectively. If you use Dataiku, you would, of course. Maybe it's just too much work and you're not sure about the return on investment for it. Or maybe the teams aren't really even sure how they would start. You'll see a perfect example of how GenAI can handle that problem using an agentic approach while keeping a human fully in the loop and allowing them to make the final decision about what changes to make upstream. So with that initial kind of setup of these fundamental reconciliation components in the middle, supported on both sides by GenAI enhancement, I'll hand us over to Leah, who will walk us through this process in some detail. Everything you're going to see runs today inside of Dataiku and would be available for you as a Dataiku user. And you're going to see, just as importantly, how the principles apply, how you can use GenAI in this sensible way to enhance and improve an existing challenging process. So with that, I'll hand it over to Leah.
Thank you, John. Give me a few seconds to share my screen, and we should be good. Okay, so you should be seeing my screen now.
We can see your flow.
Yep. Perfect. So the objective of today's demo is to show you, as John mentioned, the reconciliation solution, which allows you to reconcile two data sets that do not perfectly match. And we will also deep dive into the GenAI modules that comes after the solution. But before starting the solution demo, I will give you a quick example of a very common data preparation challenge that we can face before doing reconciliation. So here you can see an example of unstructured data. So the text includes trade information, but our goal is to convert this text into well-formatted columns. And using visual prompt recipes in Dataiku, we were able to go from the previous data set to this well-formatted version. And in this example, what we want to do is to better clean the amount column so that it only includes numerical values. So there are two easy ways to do this in Dataiku. One way will be to create a preparation recipe and to generate steps using prompts. So here, if I go over this little icon, you can see the prompts that were used to clean the data. And in that case, the results are quite good, except for this row, where the double M was not well processed by my steps. So there is another way, which is more robust in this case, where we're using a very simple prompt recipe. And in this prompt recipe, I am using the amount column as an input, and I'm also including a few examples. I'm not including the examples with the double M because I want to see if my model is good enough to process this on its own. And at the end, I should get a perfectly formatted column. So all of this worked perfectly. So now let's imagine that your data is cleaned and you want to reconcile two data sets that do not perfectly match. So the reconciliation solution will offer you a range of matching capabilities, which includes perfect join for exact matches, fuzzy join based on custom criteria, and also access to a web application where you will be able to do manual matches. To use the solution, you will go to the project setup where the user can upload or connect to his data sets, and then it will be able to set up a bunch of parameters. Let me scroll down a bit. So the most important part is to select the corresponding columns, which are referred to as keys here. And so for each pair of keys, we need to set a matching distance threshold to define the acceptable distance and the acceptable level of dissimilarity between the values in the key columns. And this threshold will be used in the fuzzy join step. Then after that, we can establish an automatic matching threshold and a maximum number of pending matches. So when the project is finished being built, we will see the results of the reconciliation in the dashboard. So the reconciliation analysis provides an overview of how records are categorized based on their alignment with the secondary data sets. The records may fall into one of several match types. So we have perfect, automatic, pending, and manual, or we also have no match. So if we were on the first run, we would see that we do not have any manual matches. This is because all the potential manual matches haven't been flagged manually yet and are still considered pending matches. The manual matching web app allows us to manually approve or reject matches based on our own review. So you have two options. You can either go to the focus mode, where you will be able to see each potential matches and review them manually here, or you can go to the full table and have all of those matches all at once. And here again, you will be able to match them manually on the right. After the review in the manual matching web app, we will be able to see all those new matches in the dashboard. So here, that's how we will end up with manual matches there. Now, let's imagine my team and I have been using this web app for a week, and our system logged all the manual matches we approved or rejected. Ideally, we would love to know if we could deduce new matching rules from how we used the web app. But it could be quite time-consuming to do that manually and to try to figure out which type of pattern we followed in order to make a decision to match or reject a matches. So this is why we added an optional GenAI module to the solution, which has not yet been publicly released, but will be available soon. So here you can see the flow zone where we built the whole GenAI components. We mainly used prompt recipes in order to build those. So as an input here, we have in this column, here. So we have the user's decision. that are stored there with the actual value that was compared and the decision that was made. So in the first prompt recipe that we have in this flow, we are asking the model to review all those decisions and generate new rules. Then we have a second prompt recipe. And here we generate a potential Python function for each rule. So we end up with a textual rule and a function. So this is what we can see in this next data set. You have the rule here, which is textual data. And then we have the function. But then to be able to review those rules, we will need to have access to a user interface. And to do so, we need some other steps in the flow. The first step will be here to convert the markdown text that we have into HTML. And then the second step will be to review, to add titles to all of the review. So I will take this prompt recipe to show you a good way to iterate over different prompts in Dataiku. So here you can see the last prompts that I used, the final one that I picked. But before I decided to go with this prompt recipe, I first tried other options. And to try other options, I used the Prompt Studio in Dataiku. So if I click here, I'll be able to access the Prompt Studio. So you can see on the left the other prompts that were tested. And for each prompt that were tested, I was able to add an input. So here it's the review. And I am also able to select a sample on which I will be testing my prompt. So here I'm testing the prompt and I can directly see the results of it. And if I'm happy with the results it came with, I can export as a recipe. And by doing that, I will be able to run the prompt in the flow. So that is what is happening here. So in the end, I end up with this data set, which includes the name and number of each review, the function that was deduced by one of my recipe, and the HTML contents. So last step, we have now a nicely formatted user interface where we will be able to review all those GenAI roles. So here we have a drop-down. In the drop-down, we are able to select different review that was built by the LLMs. So if we go to review one, we have a first disclaimer to make sure that we know that this rule was generated by an LLM. And then after that, we also have a warning. So this warning is there because we didn't have enough information to make a reliable rule. So in that case, we might not want to validate this rule, and that's clearly emphasized by this report. So if we scroll down, we'll see that the rule is not reliable and that we should not move forward with that. But on the contrary, if we go to the review 3, then we have a rule without the warning disclaimer. And in that case, we can see that a clear pattern was detected. So this pattern is quite straightforward. It sees that every time the country code has a digit at the beginning, then the rule was approved. When it did not, the rule, the match was rejected. So we have the decius ruled, and we also have a Dataiku formula at the bottom. On the right, we have a summary of the status of those rules. So let's say in this case, we were happy with the rule detected. So we decided to validate the rule. By doing so, we would see this rule appearing on the right. And this rule will be pushed into the flow to the beginning of the reconciliation process, so that the next time we will be running the reconciliation process, we will be able to see the automatically validated matches. Oops, sorry. So once the rule is pushed back into the beginning of the flow, we will have the new rule included in the reconciliation process, and we will not have to do it manually once again. The team will have less matches to review. And that's it for the demo. So in the next version of the reconciliation solution that will include this module, we will be using the agent code tools, which are tools that include code that were previously reviewed and approved by user. So that way, the code that will be used to do this new rule will not be unsecure.
Thank you, Leah. So I'll return us to our slides here. We'll finish on our delightful kind of slide here. So as mentioned, we're delighted to answer any questions that you might have. Feel free to post them into the chat. I'll emphasize a few of the critical points that were just made there, just to make sure that folks are comfortable with them. So as you saw, within Dataiku, not only can you build these powerful capabilities, but you can build them in an incredibly controlled, auditable, and appropriate manner. This is one of the most important things. Dataiku not only gives a lot of power to people, but it also allows for very effective and definitive guardrails to be placed around that power. This is why it is respected and appreciated by both an IT or technology team that you work with, and with the users on the front line themselves within the finance teams. It allows you to bridge what could often be a big gap there, because both groups feel very satisfied with the controls and the capabilities that are in place. You'll also notice that Dataiku has baked right into it a lot of the best practices that you may not even realize when you initially start to work are the best practices that need to be understood. So as you can see, there are things like the ability to use tools instead of simply generating code. Right? This is one of the most common now known best practices when it comes to agentic use cases, because it allows you to give those agents a great deal of power, but for that power to be very tightly constrained in a very fixed set of dimensions. And it resolves one of the most obvious immediate concerns that teams might have about leveraging an agent for this kind of use case. Additionally, as you'll see, Dataiku allows you to complete the sweep of a problem and also to break it into pieces. Some of the components that Leah showed at the start using GenAI recipes to process data can be used for any type of project. They don't have to be used for reconciliation. You could imagine using that 1,000 different ways to solve existing problems. And as you saw, you're not forced to use GenAI all the time. You could just build them yourselves manually using the existing visual recipes or with code. You could use the AI to assist you, but then you would be reviewing the final output of that AI and then deciding, yeah, I'm going to use this fixed formula. So the AI sped you up, but then the result is a pure formula that will always give you the exact same correct example every time, just like it would have before in something like Excel. Or you can leverage a GenAI component to process the data continuously, and in many cases solve problems that might be at the edges of your existing workflows. And in fact, you can combine them. It's not at all uncommon that you might solve the problem with a formula, simultaneously have a set of records being processed by the GenAI recipe to check for gaps, join them together, and look if there are differences. And when there are differences, you resolve them by basically saying, why is the GenAI capability generating this output and the formula is generating another? It often indicates some kind of gap in the coverage of your formula. It allows you to uncover edge cases. And again, that could be applicable across the board. And just as importantly, as you can see, there are loads of components here in order for this to be fully successful. It's not very helpful if you process data, perform some good fuzzy matching, but then you have to spit all your manual matches out into Excel. You lose a huge amount of the important value of a constrained audited process. Or similarly, it's not very helpful if you have to force all of your GenAI stuff into a completely external tool, one that perhaps likely doesn't even allow you to push records in row at a time. Maybe you have to just dump them all into a chat, try to give it some instructions and hope that the answer you get out is useful, and then, I don't know, copy paste that back in or something. That's not an effective way to build a process, and it can't be automated properly. So again, as you saw, using prompt recipes to process data continuously, row by row, is one of the most powerful capabilities you can use to leverage Gen AI properly. It's also the kind of thing you can't get out of a chatbot. And so again, this is one of the most important ways to think about how you would be leveraging Dataiku in the future. We have a bunch of great questions that have been asked. Let me start tackling a few of them as I see here. I'll start with down at the bottom. I'll cover quickly a couple that were already asked, by the way, and answered. So this solution, like any of the solutions built in Dataiku, are available to our users as is and can be installed directly with the click of a button. And indeed, when you install them, they appear as if you yourselves had built them directly. There are no black boxes, no hidden components, no special components that only exist in that solution. They all are built out of capabilities that are inherent to Dataiku. So when you install a solution, it's fully available to you, and critically, it's completely customizable. You can rip parts of it out, add completely new components into it, or keep it as is, whatever makes the most sense for your particular needs. And of course, you can copy solutions, make iterations of them. So you can have one reconciliation process over here that does one thing, and then a variant of it over here with different rules and capabilities that will just run happily and be fully automated. There's a few more great questions here. Information about privacy and the location of your data centers. A great question. So Dataiku does not themselves sell data centers or data access to you. If you like, you can buy Dataiku as a SaaS product, in which case you do get access to our data centers, and we can provide you with full detail. But in many cases, firms will deploy it inside of their own walls, often on their own private cloud. And in that case, and indeed, even in the case of using a SaaS deployment, what you're often leveraging are your existing data centers, your existing compute. We have partnerships with all of the major hyperscalers, GCP, Azure, and so on, as well as the major kind of aggregators in that space like Snowflake and Databricks, as well as with providers of AI services like, for example, NVIDIA. So you are able to choose and mix and match your underlying technologies as you see fit, which is very important for a finance team. You can also connect really classic systems like SharePoint or FTP servers if you need to, because sometimes the data sits there and hasn't been migrated over to a cloud yet. Another great question here about how long would the typical reconciliation use case from design to deployment? It of course depends on the complexity of your use case. However, as Leah showed you there, if you have a simple reconciliation use case, you're matching two data sets against each other, you already have a sense of what rules you'd like to try out, and the data is relatively clean, it would be quite reasonable to expect that you could get that up and running in one day. You would literally click a button to install it. It would then install. That would take maybe 30 or 60 seconds. You would go in and configure the application, which, as you saw there, is very straightforward. Let's assume you already have your data connections in place and IT has approved them. You would line them up, process it through, and then click go, and it would run. And from there, you'd likely spend some hours tinkering with it, playing around with the matching rules, experimenting with the web application, and so on and so forth. But that fundamental capability would easily be spun up within the first day. And indeed, it makes for a great evaluation of Dataiku. If you'd like to, that could be a great way to check out how Dataiku performs for you and get comfortable with the platform very, very quickly. There is a great question here about could we have a demo of the revenue and cost forecasting? We do have a little bit of time. It wasn't the original plan. We were just going to show you the reconciliation solution. So what I'd encourage you there, and maybe we can provide the links, we can show you where our full catalog lives. So you can see all of these in action on our website. Again, to the same scope that you saw from Leia here. You can actually see them running with realistic data. It's all synthetic, of course. You can see how they produce outputs. You can see all of the pieces inside of them. And that will give you a great sense of how to understand Dataiku and also let you see things like our financial forecasting solution and the many other solutions we have. We have dozens of them. You could also see process mining, another favorite of mine. So we'll make sure that that link gets pasted into the channel for you. Another great question, inputs to the LLM model and auditability and getting the same results with the same output. That's indeed. Great question. So within Dataiku, every component that you pass into your large language model is fully customizable. So you have the same level of parameter control as you would if you were building it out in code. You, of course, can set things to defaults as you see fit. And so there are going to be things in the background that are changing without you knowing. There's no black boxes wrapped around any of the parameters that are being entered. You can always customize them and say, keep them at a fixed seed, for example. Additionally, Dataiku provides complete auditability tracing for all of your GenAI interactions. So you have logs of all of the questions and answers being sent back and forth and so on. You also have logs, traces of the actual process that the LLM went through. So if you interact with Dataiku and use it to provide any kind of GenAI output, a trace is generated for each of those queries showing how the LLM actually executed that task. And those are all saved and then can be audited at will. They can also be used, by the way, to impose guardrails. So you can have live checking for things like improper commands, improper data inputs, and so on. And that can be processed live as the queries are being sent to whatever your chosen LLM is, which, by the way, could be an on-prem LLM, a private cloud LLM, whatever the appropriate thing is for your company. Did you experiment with reconciliation? Yes, indeed. We have one-to-one as well as one-to-many reconciliation capabilities. A very reasonable question. And if you'd like to discuss what that would look like for your own particular need, we'd be happy to discuss it. And a great question as well, in terms of all of the capabilities that you saw exist in the latest version of Dataiku, with the version number escapes me, 14 dot something. But yes, all of these capabilities that Leah showed you are just running in the latest version of Dataiku that will be available to any user today. Obviously, your company needs to be up to date with their installation, but there's nothing here that's coming soon or anything like that. It's already fully available inside of the platform. Fantastic. So glad to be able to answer a bunch of those. I wonder if we have any others. Oh, there's an interesting question here that hasn't been posted around SOX compliance. So one of the interesting things that I'll tell you around SOX compliance is, and compliance generally, is a lot of these capabilities are baked right into Dataiku. So if you were to break down what your SOX compliance needs might look like, for example, you'd end up looking at a bunch of things like data control for data edits, access controls, the ability to lock a project into a specific state and know if it's changed, the ability to govern what components of a project can be accessed by who, the ability to prove that a particular number was generated by a specific process, and for that to be known historically as well, that you could look back over time and prove where that number came from. All of those capabilities are built right into Dataiku just by using it normally. In fact, many teams find that the kind of audit and compliance challenges they might have with other systems are essentially handled automatically by Dataiku. Of course, people still need to review audit logs, make sure that systems are backed up and things like that, but it's just classic hygiene in that case. You don't have to do special parallel work in order to ensure that you have very robust auditable trails of everything that's happened inside of Dataiku. Marvelous. So I'll just check here if we have any other questions floating around, maybe in the chat box. I see there's quite a lot going on in here. Replicates to customers automatically. So the way our solutions work is we do not push updates to our solution out to customers in some kind of automatic manner because we don't want them to be disrupted in the way they work. But the latest versions of a solution are always available online and can always be installed by a user. So you will be able to keep the version as it was installed by you. And then if you like, you can migrate over to a new version as you see fit. So we try to strike a careful balance there because, again, these projects are likely very likely to have been customized even in small ways by your teams. So we don't want to interfere with that. And we really want them to be treated as projects of your own that you can own and customize and be very confident. I do see one other question here about data that comes out of PDF. Absolutely. So Dataiku has built-in OCR and GenAI multimodal processing capabilities. So if you have a PDF document, you can easily use the traditional OCR techniques, things like Tesseract from Google, say, and apply those. But you can also, as Leah was showing, using those prompt recipes, you can process PDFs directly. So you can actually use an LLM to process your PDFs. Those are wildly effective nowadays. Using the latest generation large language models instead of OCR techniques is very common now and shows very significant uplift. So if you've previously not experimented with OCR because maybe the technology seemed a little bit complex to use, or you just didn't like the results, just didn't seem to be sufficient. Retry those use cases now with the latest generation LLM. You are likely to be very impressed by the outputs. So that's, again, just kind of a fact that I can share. The use of a multimodal LLM, and all the latest gens are multimodal, is a very, very effective way to process and interpret documents. Once you process them, by the way, you're going to need to then use them in an effective manner. The most common way to process a document like that would be using a knowledge bank. Again, in Dataiku, that's just a click away. You can have a little bit of a couple of steps to process the documents, and then another step to spin up the knowledge bank where those documents will be embedded and can then be queried. So all of that, processing a PDF, setting it in a knowledge bank, and then querying it in some way, maybe using a chat bot or something else, those would all just be 3 or 4 steps in Dataiku and could be entirely visual. You wouldn't need to use any code of any kind to handle that. Marvelous. So I think we're, getting close to our 45 minutes. We've got a little bit of extra time. If anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask, I'm delighted to answer them, but it looks like we've been able to tackle some of the most important ones. If there are any of these solutions in the catalog that Marissa posted a link to here that are interesting to you, feel very free to reach out using the contact information here or with any of the contacts that you have from follow-ups. We'd be delighted to showcase those to you. And of course, as I said, you can also see them yourself if you like and decide if it's kind of for you and if you want to move forward. Marvelous. Excellent. So it looks like we've come to the close of the questions. I'll give a moment if anybody wants to get something in the last minute. No. Excellent. So do please feel free to reach out to us. The solution that you saw today is readily available. There's a last question. You absolutely can read information from emails as a source. As I said, Dataiku is highly collaborative with different sourcing systems. So not only can you read email information, now, of course, that will have to be set up by your IT team. There will have to be the appropriate connections set up. But yes, connecting to, say, an Exchange server to read mail is very common as a use case and obviously comes with very clear controls. By the way, you can also use Dataiku to send emails, Teams messages, Slack messages. Any project in Dataiku can be automated. And one of the most common things that you'll want to do with an automated project is to send a message of some kind if the project results in some outcome. So you could have an automatic deterministic messaging system, like, oh, if this number looks like this, send an email to this person or Slack this person. Or you could have an agent make that decision for you. If the numbers look bad in some kind of more general way that the agent can decide for you, elevate that to somebody using Slack or Teams or some other system. Great. I'm glad to have been asked that. It's one of the important integrations that's worth mentioning. Marvelous. All right, like I said, please feel free to go to the catalog and see all of these in action, and know that everything you've seen here is extremely usable today. Nothing that's been shown is, something that will maybe work down the line or something like that. Every example here works today. All you need is a decent large language model. There's a lot of them available. Somewhere where your data can sit and be processed on. There's going to be something like that sitting around, even if it's some old school SQL server or a fancy cloud, whatever it is. And then you need a place to do all of this work. And I would recommend that you do it in Dataiku. Marvelous. All right. Thank you all so much for your time. And we're delighted to answer any follow-up questions that you have and work with you on any of these projects and others that you might find interesting. All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.